Stay calm. You've been out there a while. I know I saw something in here to check the diagnostics on your armor.
The start of 343 Industries was Halo 4. It was one of the games that started its decline, whether it's the critics, some longtime fans, and new audiences that weren't interested. Microsoft throwing money on Halo 4 to a new developer that is inexperienced on making Halo was quite bold, but didn't pay off. With being enemies, locations, and ideas didn't went through the final cut of the game. While making Halo 5, 343 Industries mentioned they made a lot of mistakes, but with a new console, they have viewed what they wanted. This is the part where people mentioned Halo lost its identity by its art, skill, and what was revolutionized decades ago, which brought the position of Infinite having big shoes to fill, with years on making the project. Was it worth it?
Don't die.
Starting up Infinite was a rocky road when I was walking through the woods. The game still gets updates, seasonal story, and maybe story DLC, but now as years went by, people were starting to lose interest. Unlike before, Halo was the mainstream media and a juggernaut for Xbox, but that's a past decade, which now 343 Industries wanted to spark that success. From the new generation, a new console, and a new game. As for making this video and understanding the development from Bloomberg's, this part is all about what the article says and one that I took a lot of time reading, listening to interviews before, commentary, and the overview. Halo Infinite's development was started after Halo 5 was launched. It was a game that had ideas and drawn into the planning stages that were cool, from the E3 presentation, an interesting story, and a demo that while the lighting is flat, still looks promising. And 2021 makes the gamers take a breath of relief on how the game looks. It is one of the games that I am impressed with, and as much as the creative director left, it was one of the things that I saw the cracks. When making this video, I remember Halo Infinite was a game that was modified and rebranded into the Slipspace Engine. Some speculated that this is a new engine, but before the engine was called the Blam Engine from Bungie, and it is designed to be much more linear or not fully open world. It was created due to the new hardware from the Xbox Series X, and to utilize it, 343 Industries decided to spend their time on making the engine. The developers wanted to make a Breath of the Wild experience. It is an inspiration from the developers, which creates a problem in 2018. The E3 presentation, we thought it was
a real-time feed. No smoking mirrors, pre-recorded bullshit.
But it was. It isn't the demonstration of the engine, but another company who made the trailer. The reason why is because the game is not in the playable state yet, but it's rather a pre-render cutscene. Not a great start, but wait, it gets even worse. As soon as E3 2018 has moved on, there were issues with the management. This is the reason why Halo had a big trouble development. 343 Industries doesn't have a full-time employees, but relies on third-party contractors, such as animations, enemies, AI, and technology. This creates an issue where the contractors cannot speak publicly, while also needing to learn the complexity of the engine, which estimates around 4 to 7 months. The contract is also limited to more than 18 months from Microsoft, therefore not having a lot of involvement from the contractor, and needing to learn the Slipspace Engine from scratch, and continue where they left off. One developer quotes, "It feels like we are making 4 to 5 games simultaneously. They have a hard time communicating what the vision for the game was," which I can relate to. For those who create products, where you have tons of employees, higher ups, and a game that had deadlines, this one crucial aspect creates big gaps from the developers from 343 Industries. In 2019, Halo Infinite was in crisis mode, having a hard time with the vision they wanted to create, which made one of the creative directors, Tim Longo, left the company, and with this crisis mode, it needed to be cut around 2/3 of the game. This cutting the 2/3 of the game made the original vision, Breath of the Wild Halo, to be scrapped and revisioned on what we are playing from the campaign. The creative director, on the other hand, was replaced by Chris Lee. 2020 was probably the worst year for Halo and probably a blessing in disguise. The pandemic plays a huge role, and why 343 Industries blames on it. When your employees and contractors are isolated and having a hard time on what to do, especially when the contractors come and go, and an engine that the console hasn't released yet, you can see where this is going. 2020 was in a playable state, but with the infamous E3 was really bad. And I mean bad. The lighting was flat, details were lacking, and the Craig meme from Halo. The E3 was so bad that another creative director left for Microsoft, and it was Chris Lee. He was replaced by Joe Staten, a well-known writer and creative lead from the past Bungie Halo titles. He was smart in convincing Microsoft to give a 1-year delay. It was a blessing in disguise. We were all lucky how the game turned out at first, but it still doesn't have enough time. From all the faults of the engine, it wasn't really the engine's fault, but who the developers used for. It creates a huge crunch time and the term technical debt. It means shortcuts are made during development to save time. The effect on it is if you want to make some iterations, it takes a lot of time, where Joe Staten has to say, we have to make the ship run slowly, fix the technology, before going fast 100%. And that was Halo's trouble development. It wasn't your average development problem. It was like Halo 2's development hell, giving them 6 long years. And the final product was released on December 8, 2021. Halo Infinite heavily reminds me of Combat Evolve, not by its openness like the Ring, but it's the gameplay where there's difficulty, sandbox, and smart AI. As the Ackman said in his CE,
fun, fair, balanced, and challenging video game experience.
And that's quite bold for me to say, but hear me out. I played Halo Infinite's Legendary multiple times, so I had a clear understanding of the campaign. Therefore, its biggest strength is the sandbox that complements the enemies, where weapons are viable, equipments are useful in most situations, and enemies that are much more smarter. But first, why Halo Infinite succeeds in this design? As playing the game, it is much more fast-paced than other Halo titles except Halo 5. It is because as playing any games, we tend to have that muscle memory where each time you die, you always learn that mistake and not get frustrated. Where 99% of the time I die, it's because I get cocky, overconfident, or didn't use the right equipment in that situation. And the only time I actually think I get frustrated is the Ultra Chieftain with hammers, where they instantly jump at you so fast you barely have enough time to react without giving the player an audio cue. But other than that, these are a bit rare encounters and can be countered by your mobility. What makes Halo such a fun game is that having that strategy, where encounters are dynamic and rewards you from different playstyles. One thing I criticize from Halo 4 or Reach is playing much more scared, where being aggressive is an unnecessary risk to the player and can lead to frustration. Halo Infinite is much more rewarding to the risk you take, since you have a lot of options to fall back, such as equipment and weapons, where each have strength and weakness. For example, thrusters are best for being aggressive, but has the option to fall back. The downside is limited thrusters, so you have to use them wisely. The shock rifle is great for most enemies, except jackals with shields due to its low fire rate. It is a game where you have to use decisions, such as position, who to kill, how to kill, and so on. These questions always function to your mind, whether or not each encounter is different, and heavily satisfies the player who pulls it off. Halo Infinite expands what Combat Evolve was famous for, and as a result, makes the game have more options in your disposal. Which is why we're gonna talk about equipment. Equipment is such a big improvement to Halo 3, where Halo 3 is just throwing them is useless or overpowered. Halo Infinite on the other hand is very useful and gives the player an edge, where they are unlimited. In normal or heroic, we only use grapple hook since it serves the jack of all trades, but legendary, each equipment becomes crucial, where drop wall gives the cover to an open field, thrusters are great to dodge incoming melee or evading grenades, threat sensors help the player on how many enemies and camouflage elites, and grapple hook is the mobility, where you have tons of options such as being the aggressor or a way to fall back to cover in certain situations. It even lets the player use fusion calls and grab weapons where they cannot reach in the middle of firefight. My only complaint in the equipment is why should you pick thrusters when you can use grapple? It makes the thruster weak and therefore not a lot of people have a chance to use it. But other than that, this is the most fun of the fourth golden triangle, which is improving Halo 3's equipment to make them enjoyable and useful. The same can be said about the weapons, where it is the sandbox that is fun, and I have never used a useless weapon. Even traveling the open world can give variants of it, while overpowering some weapons. I appreciate it. No one cares if it's overpowered, unless it's fun to slide it in. The variant of the Sentinel Beam is the OP weapon I ever played and creates fun Razorback rides. Sure, some of the old weapons are still at the same roles, but the new weapons create new niche roles to the sandbox. One thing I criticize about Halo 4 is that weapons act the same, where they function into the UNSC. Halo Infinite has these, but it also gives new ways to use. For example, shock rifles are great for stunning the vehicles or enemies. Heatwave gives an option of long range or short range. A Banish rifle is a sniper rifle, but it serves as a Covenant DMR in a way. The only complaint I have is sometimes when you are on linear sections, you tend to use the variants because they are much better than their original counterparts. Who would pick a Bell rifle that has a slow fire rate than the faster fire rate? Why would someone use a normal energy when Okra Vagatum's sword can give you speed and great lunge attacks? Besides, these weapons give you no consequences and you can use them anytime in the open world if you're in these FOBs, which are protected by the Banish. The Banish is the only enemy faction you fight, and it's only one. Sure, there's Sentinels, but they are so niche that it doesn't matter that much. Sure, the Flood is probably the worst faction or Prometheans, but at least it gives you that sense of scale and story, giving us that memorable AI battles. Speaking of which, Halo Infinite had a missed opportunity where Sentinels can fight the Banish, where they have conflicts in some way to each other, leaving random moments to the open world, but it doesn't work like that, where they work each other on taking down the Chief, which even the monitor on the campaign sees you as an ally, they will still attack you in the end of the day. For me though, I'm sort of a mixed bag, because the Banish is the best faction I have ever fought against, where there's enemies that can pick up weapons from their allies or the armory, throwing grunts that is hilarious, brutes that can throw fusion coils back to you, and so on. It's these types of detail that create that fun, which bring back that Halo CE rule, where variants have different weapons, abilities, and their intelligence, where higher ranks can use camo, jetpack boots, brutes have shield. Variants have been an issue for Halo, such as Halo 3, where the color is blue is confusing to the ranks. Halo Reach, some variants are repeated. The only variant where I can see the repeat is the Red Hunters. It's just more health and damage, which makes them much more frustrating than you ever expect. The dialogue is much more funny and memorable.
Mom said it was my turn to play the Xbox.
Hey, we got a Craig out there? I keep hearing about some loser named Craig. Why the heck do you get all the attention?
It is the faction where, while having only one, 343 Industries made so much effort and flesh out these enemies that you have to give them credit. Halo 4 and 5 had a lack of intelligence to the AI, but now Halo Infinite finally fixes it, and it is much more reminiscent of the old Halo games we love and remember from how fair, fun, and challenging they are. What about the level design then? 343 Industries' experience on making linear levels have been decent from Halo 4 and 5, so as the Metro Exodus quote from me, so you would think they would make it good or better than previous Halo titles, and well, it's a repeat. The level design isn't bad, it's repetitive. It's where I criticize Metro Exodus, where the game has so many reused zombies that it becomes annoying. Halo Infinite doesn't have this problem, but the locations they say is a repeat. I am fine with this issue. What's not is there isn't a lot of depth. except walking, killing, power seed, walking, cutscene, and killing. Those 4 things are the repeats. Sure, that's what you expect from FPS campaigns, but what Halo Infinite lacks is scripted sequence, where in Halo 2, you prepare the defense from the Marines with that huge explosion, or where the memorable moments, such as Hornets letting you take down the Scarab by piloting or letting the pilot transport to you. Those memorable sequences that makes you surprised. Halo Infinite doesn't surprise me a lot, except the boss fights, Pelican Down, and the sequence. But those 2 missions are the open world, which are the highlight of this campaign, giving you options for it to tackle at your own pace. I also think Halo Infinite locations are lacking. On my first playthrough, it didn't affect me that much, and that's how you know the game is super fun. But when analyzing it, you tend to realize what's wrong, or why they're using assets. Act 1 and 2 were unique in some way, but the third is rushed to the door, to the point on reusing assets. This kinda explains why they had to cut 2/3 of the game at some point. More about that later. Halo Infinite is really bad at vehicles, which is another core part of Halo. Halo 4 is a bit close out, but at least there's moments such as the Scorpion, Pelican, Pilot section, and even bring the Mantis to the mix. Halo Infinite only has Warthog and Scorpion, and there is technically a Pelican, but that's a bug that 343 Industries fixed for some reason. I still don't know why they fix things that aren't game breaking for other players. It is something where you heavily notice because Halo Infinite's core part is vehicles, and making it rare hurts the fun riding with Marines. Open world is much more worse because the vehicles isn't designed to terrains and lead to stuck moments. Marines cannot drive even in linear sections, and the question is, why would you use a Warthog when you can use the grapple hook? I also noticed the vehicles are built in plastic since they can easily be destroyed even in lower difficulties. Vehicles are something where it is the core part of Halo because of the Marines saying dialogues, making that giant scale where you see Scorpions fighting that Scarab or Hornets you see in the background. Halo Infinite doesn't have that sense of scale even in their story. You don't see Marines that are involved with you. In Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, it's about rebuilding the creed, and in the final moments, every person you meet makes them fight in their last breath. For killing Caesar, the responsible for the first attack, makes it more impactful. Halo Infinite has the same plotline of rebuilding the UNSC, but their involvement is so missing that in the gameplay, you don't see them fighting, and stay in their FOVs, which as a result makes them missing, where you and Esherum and Harbinger are alone. Sure, the storyline is about Chief, Echo 216, and the weapon, but come on, give me something. It makes the FOB and other banish you destruct useless. What is the solution then? Well, capture Marines, or Marines that are ambushed against the banish. This may be a solution, but the only thing that affects is gameplay and Valor ports, which by the way, Valor ports are a cool idea and makes the progression on getting cool UNSC guns, Marines, and vehicles, but as I said, it only affects gameplay. I'm sorry to viewers that are watching that sounds like me saying it in a broken record, but what 343 Industry miss are involvement to your allies, the other Spartans we hear in audio logs, Lasky, Dr. Halsey, Arbiter, and so on. Open world is a mixed bag for me. I can empathize with the developers where they cannot do what they have vision for, but for me, it is where I say it is very mediocre. It isn't bad what people expect, but I can see where they're coming from. Halo Infinite is very similar to Far Cry 3, and that's what people expected it to be. But is it a bad Far Cry 3 open world? No, it isn't. It's actually really good. First off, the banished bases. These are really well designed, each have different objectives, and scripted moments such as the Banish Drop, Phantom Racing, and really fun playing with Marines with the Razorback. It is the bonus level design from this game, and it is still really well in depth to its design. Sometimes you have to go to the underground, you destroy this propaganda, this huge bridge, and so on. This is the best open world when it comes to bases, because they are different, where it enhances the gameplay and music. You can fight with Warthogs, Scorpions, Hornets, and etc. You have different moments and follow what Far Cry 3 succeeds, making it addicting to play. That dynamic also leads to Spartan cores, mini bosses, and capture AIs. They have scripted moments such as sending reinforcements like ODST style, Phantom waving in, and it's the Spartan cores aren't just go there and take it. Sometimes you even found it to a banished Forerunner base, making it much more believable that the banished are scavengers and take whatever weapons they can find. It is the open world where I enjoyed in my first playthrough, and lately when revisiting the game, I appreciate 343 Industries' effort on making the campaign, where the banished are a threat, and never tell me the odds. It's reasonable why the Master Chief is called a demon, with the music making those beats pleasant to hear. Garrett, Curtis, and Joel are great composers. They took what they listened to the old Halo games and understand the melody with it, and my favorite examples are these soundtracks. Sure, people can say they feel like copies, but it isn't. They take what is great and utilize new instruments or materials, and implement their own style of music. Having 3 main composers is really difficult, but when directed to certain specific tasks, the outcome can lead to memorable soundtracks. The bonuses, of course, and something I want to mention, are propaganda towers. These have so many references, such as the Craig meme, the self-awareness to the grunt, and so on. Armor cores are a cool bonus for multiplayer skins, and audio logs are really nice to not abandon what Halo 5 ended. It is the open world where I say the same thing in Metro Exodus. It is much more believable because of how much effort it went instead of the linear level designs. The complaint I have with the open world is the armor cores are quite useless in repeat playthroughs, and probably my biggest problem is audio logs. They are very forgettable. It doesn't let you show what happened, but instead tell. I criticize Halo 4 about the terminals, but at least it shows what happened to the Forerunners, instead of telling. This could have been a band-aid because, as I keep repeating myself, they cut so much in the campaign that this is their only choice of solution, to know what happened, but that solution isn't engaging enough for me to listen to. I think a campaign downloadable content would work as like a hint or opportunity, but so far, there's none of that. Well then, what about bosses? Halo 2 boss battles were inconsistent. They are underwhelming, bullet sponges, and hilarious. Halo 5 was a repeat to a mediocre boss that is already tiring to fight. Halo Infinite in the main mission doesn't have this issue because they feel like real bosses and even have unique ways such as a different horror vibes and the honor way to do well. On Heroic, they are very easy, but Legendary is a different topic. They're very difficult, but as long as you have specific gear, it's easy to exploit. Where they have weaknesses, such as the Needler is such a useful weapon because of the Super Combine and makes it easier to defeat them. It is not that good or bad, but in 343's Industries' second attempt implementing bosses, it's passable, at least. The two faults are Brood duos, since on Legendary they are a nightmare to play on, and Harbinger is very easy but the Ultra Chieftain isn't because of the jump attack. The open world on the other hand are just normal enemies except with more health. Well, technically if it's not a Jackal, Grunt, or Skirmisher, but the rewards are cool weapon variants that you can give the Marines to fight, which is a cool idea and makes those Razorback rides much more enjoyable. Overall, Halo Infinite is a game that has great impressions at first, but with the trouble development issues leads to late game being rushed. It is a game where even if it had trouble development, the game is still fun and well enjoyed by the community. Sadly though, as replaying the game, the open world isn't much more enjoyable to collect, which is expected from open world titles. The same can be said about the stories. Halo 5 was the game where it was all over the place. It is a game where clearly lost direction, and the writers weren't confident about its themes, plot, and characters. But it was something to set up for the ring we saw in the ending. The opening is the best example of Halo 5 storytelling told poorly. It is filled with exposition, no emotion, and doesn't have that sense of relatability from the characters. They feel like generic robots that is in the story for the sake of it. Halo Infinite improves the narrative opening, where it shows your allies losing to an unknown enemy that is the Banished, showing that emotion of a person isolated away from his family that the hologram keeps repeating over and over, only to have run out of batteries, where it feels hopeless, only to see the savior of the UNSC, where Spartans are the beacon of hope. Seeing Chief activated makes us cheer about his reawakening, and then infiltrate the base alone to blow up Gobrakan in a stylish escape, having the agency of a player showing their impact on their own, where they destroy the giant ship, and the plot already established with a clear villain, characters, and the faction's motivation. This first mission sets up the plot and theme to this game, where it is plain and simple to understand, and each time, we tend to progress the plot or know the characters more. The characters are the best for the story due to their personality and ability, but all are believable and grounded. They have connections that grow over the game, and they're strong, not because they have plot armor, but overcoming struggles from the Banished, and outnumbered 3-1. This reminds me of Infinite Warfare, where characters have tons of cast, and yet they have their own traits that don't feel generic, but something you would watch them to end their struggles that they overcame. This applies in Halo Infinite, and another reason why I finished this game is because of the cast of characters. While only 3, it shows how depth, likable, and interesting they are, such as the Master Chief. He is a character that Steve Downes has voiced for more than 20 years, and him still having his role with the same effort and longevity is astonishing, with being a combination of stoic or coldness, and emotional or human. 343 Industries did a great job on portraying the Master Chief as a vessel of a player and as a character that transitions slowly to a protagonist, where giving hints of honoring dead Marines and showing the emotion to Echo 216 about him failing his mission, thoughts and regrets about Cortana in a Master Chief way, using one-liners that are memorable.
We've got a score to settle.
And explains everything, where it referenced previous Halo titles.
Our duty as soldiers is to protect humanity, whatever the cost.
We need help, not heroics.
No, we do our duty. Protect humanity, whatever the cost.
He is very cold on how he talks, and some lines on what would the player think if he is the Master Chief.
We need to run!
I need a weapon.
Anything that I have problems with the narrative does not stem from the character and the actor. They did a wonderful job on portraying the best version of the Chief, artistically and emotionally. The weapon is also cast by Jen Taylor, who is voiced by Cortana, and making her feel like a copy, not by narrative reasons, but also trying to replicate her voice that sounds like Cortana is commendable, and give realism on copying Cortana to the story. She is a character we're giving that good vibes and seriousness within the team, which kinda feels forced but is reasonable due to her inexperience on the battlefield, where the character can have flaws. We'll talk about that plot later. And the pilot, or Echo 216, being a one-dimensional character and a bit annoying, but in the second act, it's where he started to feel a bit of hope and starts being optimistic with Chief instead of being negative about him. It's reasonable why at first he wanted to go home, where he hasn't seen his family for months and weeks and is afraid to fight the Banished. He struggles on surviving due to being a civilian that went over the top adventures in just few hours with Master Chief, where tons of events happen, which brings his relatability. Whereas the villains though are underwhelming, and Eshram is the best example in how it devolved to a threatening leader that has authority, such as Tartarus, to become a trash-talking Xbox gamer. Eshram is a villain I do not understand and quite confused, where he is a villain that has moments of authority, or stopping the Master Chief's progress by commanding the Harbinger to drop the weapon is very rare, and hurts the character a lot. I can see what 343 Industries is doing to Eshram, where the Banished odds are very high that it feels like there's no challenge, and wanting to challenge the best Spartan 2 in the entire Halo universe is great on paper, but the build-up at first is cool. He trash talk, threatens how the Infinity is weak and gets destroyed in few minutes, but all this build-up feels off. Example of Eshram telling Yeager to follow the Master Chief at a distance to know how we play, but we never see him in the open world or linear sections except in the late game of getting ambushed. There's some subtle moments where he killed the Spartans that we found to unlock a specific equipment, but that's it. There's no scripted sequence where he is giving subtleness that he is stalking you, or learning that you use a battle rifle a lot that changed Eshram's tactic in the boss level. But there's no effect in the gameplay, which is disappointing because the build-up would have made an impact on the last duel from Eshram. That reminds me of Tai Lung saying,
"Our battle will be legendary!"
It could have been avoided when Eshram was at his prime and defeats the Master Chief in the Infinity, and then when months came by, Eshram lost his prime, but is still hungry to destroy the Master Chief in another duel, and that would have changed the story in a better way. Aatrox being dead won't disappoint the fans of Halo Wars 2, and Eshram past prime cannot defeat the Master Chief. At least it does something other than fucking hologram trash talk.
Do you know how long it took us to neutralize your greatest ship? 4 minutes! In 4 minutes!
Shut the fuck up. This also applies to the Harbinger. Her reveal is very mysterious, only to be a boss that is a joke in the gameplay section. At least she can create tension by destroying the weapon in a surprising way, or makes her a new entity that is intriguing. While her reveal is super rare, after defeating Eshram, you went to destroy the Harbinger immediately, which, without anything to understand to the new faction, is a shame. Halo 2 was a great story because it shows the villain side of its narrative. Tartarus as a side villain does something where he is being oppressive to Arbiter, having that authority against the brutes, and only following the prophet of truth. Every scene of Tartarus does something that progresses the plot or shows the character further, understanding the religiousness of the Covenant in Halo 2, expanding the story of the Halo universe, and what makes Tartarus such a badass that he dislikes the elites, because it feels like the brutes doesn't have much credit as the elites, therefore stealing the sacred icon and betraying Arbiter to make him more credited makes him feel better. He's a villain who also has tension because of him activating the Halo rings that can destroy the galaxy, and when Arbiter confronts him, you can see the emotion for a moment, only to remember that he devotes to the cause of the Covenant. In general, what makes Tartarus such a badass is he does something that makes him interesting and scary, and that's what Eshram lacks. He doesn't do anything except talk, and that's what I hate about Eshram. What I love about Infinite is the camera shot, having all one-shotted in the entire campaign, but it creates tons of limitations. Although, let's start with the positive. The cool thing about one-shots is you can do it creatively and seamless transitions, but also feel that we are much more focused to the main cast of characters that never cuts or interrupts the pace of the scene. The unique shots of Chief to Eshram, or Master Chief first time meeting the Harbinger. It also creates seamless transition to a cutscene to gameplay in a smooth way. It makes those scenes much more cooler in the presentation. What's not is sometimes with being one shot, you cannot show how you're getting shot by the Banish or villain's goals. Instead, you see the weapon and the Chief so many times talking that it becomes tiring. Metro Exodus 2 Kernels is different because of its transition to past and present, but rarely it makes the same two characters talk to each other in a different cutscene, with it being first person much more immersive. Halo Infinite could have done what they did to Master Chief to Eshram often so we can
Mix things up a little.
It breaks the villain side more and show their creativity to do different variants of one-shots in an entire scene. But I can appreciate this because with the themes and story, it's more about the Master Chief and the weapon, experiencing the game with their own shoes, view, and their actions, which is why I can understand what they are doing. That doesn't mean they keep talking to each other. There's always gonna be action where we drop to a command spire or fight the Harbinger in a first-person view. This view also applies to the whispers from the Chief. Each mission that we progress, we hear Cortana silently talking to us. And this is a big improvement because it doesn't force us to stop in Halo 3, but it's optional for people who prefer to play the game, with whispers that reference the previous Halo games or dust and echoes of the old characters, and how we became the Master Chief and Cortana at the same time. These whispers are hints to the things to come, which brings mystery and intrigue to the player, and I love it. It's a continuation about Cortana's thoughts about Master Chief, or remembering about the journey they went through the previous Halo games, and that is the plot I only enjoy story-wise. which is basically finding out what happened to the past and how the weapon wasn't deleted yet. The other plots are to stop the Banish from the new Harbinger and rebuilding the UNSC from Installation 4. I already mentioned about my disappointment about the UNSC with their lack of involvement in the gameplay section, so I won't be repeating it here. But the weapon deletion was my favorite plot because of the Master Chief effect on thrusting the weapon due to being a copy of Cortana, where previously Cortana became rogue and makes Chief lose thrust. You can evidently see in the late game how he almost deleted the weapon and slowly but surely trusting each other in the end, with Cortana's whispers revealing the truth. Fan service is another factor why people like this narrative. There's many reference, homage, and moments that is like that aha moment, but the fan service doesn't feel forced. They fit the sentence, and the scene makes sense in a narrative standpoint. To those who didn't play the other Halo games, the scenes will at least give you a brief moment on what happened. My least favorite plotline is got to be the Banish, and this new faction, especially while the Harbinger only disrupts the pace of the narrative and isn't memorable or something to be interesting in. But how did that happen? We had Halo for 2 decades and there isn't a hint of this endless thing. This bringing back the endless that was held in a cell for centuries reminds me of a plotline of like activating the Halo rings. Halo 3 stopped the squirrel from blasting the Halo that could destroy the galaxy. Halo Infinite stopped the monkey summoning the endless. It's a retread from previous classic trilogies, and sure, I could accept that in Halo 1 and 3. We know why if we activated the rings, we can destroy the galaxy. But in Halo Infinite Endless, we summon them, and what's the stake? The ring cannot destroy them? That's it? It's just a stake of the Endless with lack of information from the previous Halo games, and infinite lack of presence of the Harbinger is the reason why the storytelling for me is something I'm not interested in. There's not a lot of information about this Endless, and 343 Industries might just add a new faction that just appears in the narrative for no reason. This might be a cut content from narrative section, and this is just only speculation. So take this a grain of salt, where after defeating Eshram, we went to this island called Behemoth, visiting this Forerunner in the concept art, and then in 2020, it might reveal offensive bias from Chief's visor about the Endless and the idea on why the Endless exists in the first place, since he was deployed to be responsible for the Endless, but it got cut due to time constraints. Having to see Eshram then instantly fight the Harbinger is a wrap-up that didn't make sense, and it's because of this crucial plotline. And the effect on it leaves the story a lot to be desired, and that's the missed opportunity that 343 Industries could have added. Yet, with all the issues with the campaign, it doesn't ruin the great experience I had from this game, because there's actual effort from the employees, artists, designers, and actors. When I played Halo Infinite's campaign, I could see the passion and ideas from this game, that while having flaws, it doesn't ruin my experience from playing Halo Infinite, and that's what was missing from Halo 5, where it made me excited for the DLC, and starving for more. Just like the multiplayer.
You get to choose your name.
Then I think I might have the perfect one.
All right, here we go. Get ready.
Not only the campaign had a huge change, but also the multiplayer, especially the core gameplay of it. It turned into a hero shooter that reminds me of Team Fortress 2 or Overwatch. Gladly this has been changed to be more of a classic Halo gameplay that actually succeeds. In the 20-year anniversary of Halo, they announced the beta of the multiplayer super early that the community didn't expect. And I'm proud to say that I had the flight from the early game. And while it's just bots, slowly but surely, it shows us iconic modes like Big Team Battle and Slayer. Well, only 2. The modes, gameplay, and maps were super fun, but most importantly, it feels like Halo. And that was my story from the beta hype itself. I was happy that I had the flight and it shows some new maps, weapons, and battle pass while the game is still beta testing at first. It was promising, where in Season 1, even if it was showing the faults, I almost completed the battle pass because how fun the game is, which we are going to talk about that. What makes a good ingredient? A good ingredient is the gameplay, which the chefs understand, where they did the 3 golden triangles, melee, grenade, and weapons, as 3 forms of attacks in the golden triangle. But adding a bit of sauce, which is the 4th triangle, is equipment. And not only 343 Industries succeed on the campaign, they also succeed on the multiplayer, with it being limited into 3 to 5 usages. It's the most fun game I ever had because the core gameplay is great and almost perfect, where everyone is in equal starts and scavenging better weapons in the battlefield to dominate your opponents. It's simple, easy to understand, and repeatedly fun, with modes that is Fiesta, Oddball, or Capture the Flag works in these modes. This gives a lot of moments that are satisfying to pull off, like force pushing them into the ground like a Jedi, or aiming the quickscope from a sniper. There's a lot of moments that make this game fun, and every time I revisit this game, I still enjoy playing Halo Infinite, and I'm happy to say that, because the weapons are balanced, movement feels smooth, and most importantly, it leaves a lot of opportunities for new modes that works with the core system. Slayer is a fun, simple mode where the better opponent wins. Oddball requires teamwork, where it leaves a lot of close and surprising moments. Big Team Battle Total Control has these objectives that are random and makes it replayable. Speaking of replayability, there's the maps. One thing I love about Infinite is the maps are dynamic to different weapons and power-ups, where you're able to experience the full arsenal of weapons, equipment, power-ups, and modes that are asymmetrical and randomly placed instead of the same thing over and over. It's quite innovative in a way, like capturing the flag in Big Team Battle. You would expect the flag would be in the same spot, but after capturing it, it will be in a different spot that you need to capture. It's a fun dynamic idea that leaves a lot of new strategies that makes these maps a net positive, and I wish there would be a great maps in Slayer, which Halo doesn't have. The maps aren't bad, it's just mediocre, which isn't great. People criticize the maps because it doesn't have that interaction, and I can understand that part, where the maps feel more competitive in Slayer. If you look all the map pools from launch, they have 3 lanes that have some verticality and are repeated throughout. The only maps I know in Slayer that doesn't have this trend in launch are Launch Site, Recharge, and Behemoth. 3 out of 7 maps that felt different and more open. 4 out of 7 on the other hand are maps that has only 3 lanes that is repeated throughout with some verticality. At least the game doesn't have invisible barriers, which is a good thing because it won't let the players get frustrated and restricted with a grapple or repulsor. And with Season 2 and 3, the maps have been improved and doesn't mistake the same trend, such as Catalyst being a 3-story height map that brings a lot of tension, or Livefire being this open map field that has a gravity lift. When revisiting the maps, I can see great improvements to it, so I hope in the future, they will not make maps that feels a bit repeated, except Big Team Battle maps, because the modes and design of the map are great. Fragmentation is the best example where you can use gravity lifts, fighting over these power weapons that change into the variants from the campaign in later seasons. Oasis being their recent map, where you can fight on foot and open vehicle battles. It is great. And looking through the map design, I can see 343 Industries listening to feedback about their maps, where it doesn't have that interactability. I hope in the future they would add maps that have some sort of interaction in the environment. What were the modes when the first game launched? Slayer, Big Team Battle, Free for All, Fiesta, and Tactical Slayer from Season 1, which is abysmal to say because there's so many things that are missing, and if you play the Master Chief Collection, you would understand why. And I'll show you some example. Pre-lobby matches. You can click any mode you want to play. The game has much more customization. It allows you to download on what game you wanna play. It's simpler and much more understandable. The UI in Infinite is also fucking shit, and I remember where you're queuing up, you can't even fucking customize your weapons and armor while you're waiting for the match. But now with the recent updates, you can. But one thing about the UI is you have to wait for 10 to 30 seconds to load, and even when the updates fix it, it still happens and gets pretty annoying, where the game is still loading, even if you boot up the game. I for one got pretty sick and tired about it, especially the modes. What happened to the modes like Team Snipers, Griffball, Theater not being buggy, Forge not appearing in launch, Campaign Co-op, replay missions from the campaign, split screen co-op. Like man, I could list all the modes and missing features, but it's going to be a long video. To the fucking point, I can't list them all. This is the first time I literally rant about modes, and it's because I fully expect at least there will be decent amount of modes and community features, which didn't happen. Now in Season 3, there are modes like these, but not all of them, which is disappointing to say because it's been a year, and where has it been? What about the events? Are they good? Well, some events can give you one mode like attrition, but nowadays, what happened to that mode? It was a fun mode that leaves so many players wondering. And if they bring it back, they should bring it to competitive play. But anyways, the events are really disappointing in lore perspective. They are more into the description that doesn't matter even if it's non-canon. I felt like these lores about the armor don't matter that much because it's just writing that are words. No maps that are in team events, and rarely there's going to be a new mode. Tenrai is my favorite armor because I played Sekiro, but it just repeated the mode, which is Fiesta, an event that I already got tired of because it's reused, and the same thing, while suffering people's patience because it gives you phases on which week when the event starts, and those phases doesn't change that much except play the same mode with our new armor pieces, which is why people never came back in the first place. Season 1 is where you see the red flags, where 85% of the people left the game, and has been slowly declining. I disagree people saying it's dead, but decline is rather a word I would agree. The game is still playable, it's just not that fast queue on what you expect. I literally quit at Season 2 because it was really disappointing, where seeing all the negatives just made me give up, and you can evidently see the battle pass. I didn't grind that much. And one thing I fucking hate is Bonnie Ross. She's a 343 Industries head and is aware with the modes that are not in launch, where she stated,
I don't think that Halo would do well after that. Like, I don't think you can kind of put out what I would call a half-baked game on a franchise that's so important.
And this.
And I would say for any FPS going out forward, we will always have split screen in going forward, but painful learnings.
We have had to make the difficult decision not to ship campaign split screen co-op and take the resources that we would use on that and go after this list and all these other things that we're going to talk about.
Mate, I know you're aware of this shit and you still don't do anything. Not even finding solutions like delaying the multiplayer, but not a campaign. You just let your company have a bad reputation, and even if it's Microsoft, you could have just convinced them about the game being not a good idea on launch. And if you don't have any choices, you just let your fans eat a great food that tastes bland without spices. I didn't play Halo Infinite that much in Season 2 because the armor cores are restricted, where it doesn't have that cross-core customization, desync being an issue still, and having no quality life features. 343 Industries saying this as a live service is bullshit because the updates are so slow in Season 1, which made people quit instantly and move on. Counter-Strike Global Offensive wasn't great at launch, but at least the game had so many updates to fix the game, like a live service, and it became one of the best esports scenes in the world. I'm just so sad that this game was really doomed to the multiplayer side, because I felt like playing it now in Season 3 is so great, and they are updating it a lot, where there's weekly mode rotations, challenges that are much easier, finding solutions with the UI, making the story content interesting with the event team on some maps, having forged people that are passionate on doing the maps, and more. As playing this game, this could have been the multiplayer people have played in the long term. Even if it had missing features like infection, all those positives outweigh the negatives, because there's a lot of what could have been, and being launched this year, people would have been positive with the current state of Halo. But as Thanos always says, reality is often disappointing. And that's what Halo is, a disappointing reality. In conclusion, Halo Infinite in the campaign leaves so many things to be desired, but at least it gave people excitement with the DLC, and as long as they give hints or leave audience wanting more, the next DLC will be much more promising. On the multiplayer, it's starting to trend upwards in terms of quality, and it still impressed me on how good this game is, with the content being here. It's just too little, too late. Halo Infinite has all the right gameplay elements, but without any spy system modes and community features, they won't care. In the end of the day, people will stop playing the game, and that's what Halo Infinite multiplayer is, a good game, but not a lot of people care. Because of the first impressions matters the most. Since I have not a lot of things to say, I'm just gonna put the memes that I made for no reason. Calling them memes is not really true. I don't know if it's memes, but it's just what I edit to make it funny.
Think about it, Victor. You don't look well. If you're gone, what will happen to Nora?
Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!
What? Hello? What? Wait! What?
What? So the single hit?